The subject you chose for this week was emotional eating, right?
And is it okay to have a cheat day? Which is
Right.
actually a huge question on the keto diet, and something that I want to say, guilty of. So I figured that was a great topic to bring into a week that I'm not sure if everyone else was feeling the amount of, with inauguration and all the stuff that's been happening in the world right now. It's just been completely out of our hands, but somehow at least affected me pretty strongly, just with it being like as negative and seeing all the stuff on the news and everything like that. So with me, it was a really big week for my emotions to be down, especially as someone who suffers from pretty severe anxiety and a little bit of depression. Like, I will say that that's like one thing as a person that I've always relied on in the past is comfort eating, comfort food in that sort of sense. And I kind of wanted to talk about it because I'm on a lot of the groups on Facebook and keto, for beginners and everything like that. One big question that seems to come up is it okay to have a cheat day? And I feel like that would be a great conversation because, we're two different people here doing keto, I think the same exact way, but also in different ways.
Right. But we also have quite a few guests that have joined us today,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's more than two. But yeah, you've opened a can of worms because if we if we use the phrase emotional eating, I think that gets knocked around and it gets abused a lot in terms of like media, because basically when it comes down to eating, uh, if you think about the emotional part of it, I think there's two aspects of that. One aspect is your own personal relationship with food. And the other aspect of that is the social one. What happens when you're in a group, right? And for me, the elephant in the room, especially as a health coach, uh, is are the carbohydrates, because both protein and fats are required. There's essential components of both of those. We can't live without protein and we can't live without healthy fats. That is in itself a fact. But the other side of that coin are the carbohydrates, and they're not essential. We produce what we need in order to function. We don't have to, and I'm going to use a quote here from a guy, Dr. Siwes, who I reviewed a bunch of his stuff this morning, starting a few hours before our vlog cast this morning. In that you don't have to put carbohydrates in your face in order to live. We produce them biologically. Why am I getting settled out on the carbs? Because they activate the same part of our brain as alcohol and other drugs that are highly addictive. Am I saying that carbohydrates are the same as, shooting up with heroin? And no, I'm not saying that at all. Carbohydrates have a more subtle effect. And when you put in decades of eating them, though, they create levels of addiction. And everybody, out there is an individual. So, the effect that carbs have on us happen on a continuum. Where on one side of the line, one end of the line, I should say, there's little effect. But on the other side of the line, there's a lot of effect. And if we were to put a shape on that line, on the end where there is little, if any, effect on a particular individual, but on the other end of it, it's going to be broad and sort of oblong, right? Most of our society is sitting to the side of addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And how do I know this? All right. And I'll just get this out I'll get the statistics out quickly and then I'm going to shut up so we can start having a discussion about this. We know that for people that are my age, over 50 years old, and I'm 62, that over 52% of our population is pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetes. So we fall in the category of being carbohydrate intolerant. And we sit to the right end of that line, towards the end of the line where there is carb addiction. When you account for people that are overweight and obese, and you put those statistics together, 72% of our population is overweight and obese, and we sit together on the right end of that line. We're both carbo intolerant, and we have addictive tendencies towards carbohydrates. And then lastly, cardiovascular disease. They also are over 50% of our population. So again, we have three major categories of chronic disease that are associated with carbohydrate intolerance and are sitting to the right end of that line as far as carb addiction goes. So as a health coach, and even in my own transition, we have other people that have joined us this week, so I want to be absolutely clear about this. I was pre-diabetic two years ago, and I went on the ketogenic diet, and I have had to also struggle, and I think a lot of people who make this transition have had to struggle with food addiction issues, right? When we shift from eating the standard American diet, which is 55% and north of that of carbs every single day, and we shift to the ketogenic diet, which has fewer carbs in it, substantially fewer carbs in it, then there were habits that I had to overcome. So this is what we're talking about here. When we talk about emotional eating, it's actually a really big deal, because anyone who wants to make a shift in their life like this has to contend with relationships that they have with food, right? And I had my own relationships with food, like dark chocolate with a lot of sugar in it, that I ate the big massive bars right before I went to sleep, and 3 beers a night with high carbs in there before I even had dinner, that was loaded with rice and potatoes and things like that. Those issues have to be overcome. And then second to that, well, and not maybe in list of priority here, but the other aspect of that is what happens when you're in a social environment and you're trying to, make this lifestyle change. And here's all this food that's being presented to you, not only by family members, but perhaps best friends and things like that. And these are things that you should not be eating, right? How do you deal with that? All right, I'll shut up.
I guess that brings up a really good topic, because I think scientifically we have been taught that carbohydrates are really, really, good for us. But also, I think emotionally, and I'm going to talk about the emotional level, because I think I have a really big emotional relationship with some foods that's really hard for me to give up, especially like if we talk about my time of month and certain areas around, like times around there, and the foods that I like really severely crave during those times. So I kind of want to, from my side of things, I want to talk about an actual, like a mindset that I have emotionally with, like, I'm going to say popcorn, because my whole entire life, I love popcorn. I mean, I will, me and my brother, Levy, we used to watch movies and just house popcorn, and I think it was also the same thing, like with Daddy Bob. We'd always, like, the big family thing was going to the movies and eating popcorn, right? So a comfort for me is to sit down and watch TV and eat popcorn. And that's one thing it's something that makes me feel good. And that's the issue. It's something that makes me feel good because it's something that I was taught to really, really love. And it has like, and then I'm not going to go into the psychology of things, but like psychology in my mind, I think of popcorn and movie nights, and I'm like, okay, like that is a comfort for me, because I mean, as you know, there was a lot in my life that I was constantly traveling, constantly doing things. So it was like a moment of pause was going to the movies and eating popcorn. So it's like I've associated that to this day with my life, right? And I've noticed on my time of month, if we're going to talk about emotional eating, and the reason I'm bringing this up because it happens to be this week, is I have a really strong emotional problem with popcorn. It's really, I can't have it in the house, otherwise I'm going to eat it, right? And I think that there is like it is an emotional problem for me, because to be honest, I mean, I probably, I mean, you being my father, I do have metabolic health issues, but I was not diagnosed as like pre-diabetic or with cardiovascular disease or something like that. So for me, my mindset goes to, well, isn't it okay to just have like one bag, or something like that? And I have to constantly remind myself of, and this brings me to, okay, if I have one bag, that's going to throw me completely out of ketosis, right? And I have to think about it on a scientific level of, okay, if I have one bag, it's going to throw me out of ketosis, and how long is it going to take me to get into ketosis, and what can I substitute that craving for that's something that isn't high in carbohydrates, that is really good, right? Because realistically, I love food. I live to eat. I mean, that's the truth. I love food. I love the way it tastes. I mean, I'm not going to go to a different country and not eat their food, right? I love food. I love it. But how can I adjust certain foods so that I can eat them? Or how can I substitute them? So on my keto journey, a big challenge for me has, if I like something like enchiladas, I love enchiladas. I found out how to make keto enchiladas, right? Like, and they're just as good or 10 times better than enchiladas with carbohydrates. But how can I substitute popcorn? And I want to bring that, I want to hear other people's opinion, because I feel like I struggle with that a lot sometimes, is that it's hard for me to sometimes adjust my mindset to, I can't eat that. But in my mind, I'm like, if I eat it that one time, how bad is it going to affect me? Right? I
So
mean,
there's different schools of thought about this. Well, I actually think there's kind of like, I've been thinking a lot about this over the course of the week leading up to this morning. I think, again, thinking about a line, because I think it's a metaphor everyone can understand. You've got, from a psychological standpoint, you've got two ends to the line. On one end, there's people that apparently can eat without developing these habits. And on the other end of the spectrum, there are people that can eat that aren't going to develop habits. The elephant in the room, though, is the carbohydrates, because the fact is, when you get high enough in the amount of them that you're eating, they disrupt the hormonal balances that control eating and the ability to stop eating. That's the one thing, the advantage that we have with protein and fat. We evolved on a diet that was high in protein and fat. And when I say high in protein, I mean about like what we're eating right now, right? Fat was the preferred thing with hunters and gatherers, for good reason, because they're really clean calories. But okay, so I don't want to get off on a tangent, but when you sit down and you have a plate of food that's dominantly protein and fat, you can't overeat that stuff, because if the carbs are low enough, you're going to get the signaling, which is normal, for you to stop eating, right? The problem with the carbs is that you start with it. And I mean, think about this, the last time, and it's been 2 years since I ate chips. I fully admit I'm one of these people that could make the lifestyle change, and then I haven't gone back. I haven't gone out of it, right? But I haven't been out of it so long to forget what it's like to eat my favorite chips, right? And you think, I can remember preparing dinner for you and Linda, my wife, and I've got, I'm on my second beer and I've got a bag of chips open, and I would tell myself I'm only going to have a couple of these chips. What happens, right? Half a bag later. Why is that going on, right? And think about what's in the chips. It's maximal carbohydrates with a ton of salt on it. You have one and then you got to have another one, and you just keep going with it. And I can remember on those nights getting to the point where I had that big plate of food in front of me and I didn't even want to eat it anymore, you know?
I
So,
think it's so interesting to hear like the science behind it, because I mean in my mind I've always just thought like, dang, chips are just really good. I'm just gonna keep eating them. And in a way, again, I'm gonna associate your, like how you put together as emotional eating has to deal with the signaling of carbohydrates. And I think that actually a part of it has to do with the signaling of carbohydrates. And I think we should focus on that for a second, right? Because you just said you had your 2 beers, you were eating chips, and you said, you're only going to have a couple, and then half a bag later, right, the chips are all gone. And it's because you just keep eating them, right? It's
yeah,
signaling that you're constantly wanting to eat them.
it's,
Whereas like
it's,
I've never associated that with, like, for example, like popcorn, right? Which is the hardest thing, has been the hardest thing for me to give up. And unlike you, I think you stuck to this, the ketogenic diet, like super strict, whereas I haven't been as strict with it. I'm still strict to the keto diet, but I'm not as strict as you are, right? Like I have eaten a bag of popcorn in the past 2 years since I have been on the keto diet, right? I have had a couple bites of ice cream here and there on the ketogenic diet. The difference is I've really cut back on the intake of what I was eating, right? So let's say like Austin gets some ice cream, right? I'll have a couple bites of it, or like 3 bites of it, or whatever. And instead of me consuming a ton of ice cream, or the same thing with popcorn. But what I'm trying to say is that emotional eating that you're talking about, that I'm talking about, that you can't stop eating it because we think it's emotional, is actually a signal of, and if you, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're saying is the more we have an emotional connection to food, like the bag of chips you're talking about, the more we eat of it is actually carbohydrate signaling to us that we're not done with that food, that we want to
right.
keep eating it.
If once you start down the road of piling in the carbs, you basically are overcoming, you're generating an insulin response, which is massive. And because all that carb that's coming into your bloodstream has to be dealt with, right? We've evolved to have a certain amount of carbohydrates running in our bloodstream all the time, because we need more than one type of energy source. The main two energy sources being fat and carbs, but the carbs are very specialized. And the blood sugar is being maintained by an insulin and glucagon balance in a specific window. So as soon as I started down the road, focus on me here, of hammering those chips, and the beer that I used to drink, right, had 23 or 25 grams of carbs per bottle, right? So as soon as you start down doing that, hell, by the time that plate of food was sitting on the table in front of me, I'd already had over 100 grams of carbohydrates. So your insulin is way up in the sky. My insulin was pegged. And when the insulin gets that high, it disrupts the other um, eating hormones that normally would be telling you, okay, you've had enough to eat, stop eating, right? And I want to be careful here not to go overboard into the science, but the leptin and the ghrelin, those two main hormonal systems are being disrupted. On the other hand, when we're ketogenic, right, and we're eating a diet which now is composed mostly of fat and a protein component, that those hormonal systems are running normally. So like last night we had salmon for dinner with some cauliflower on the plate, along with another veg. I don't remember exactly, and then a salad. And technically speaking, that's way less than I used to eat. But by the time I was done with that plate, I was completely satiated. I didn't have the need to eat anymore. My body was like, all right, you've had enough. And I wasn't hungry last night before I went to bed. And that's the main point. If back in the day, I would get home and there would be an expectation for me in terms of my own habits, right? To eat certain things as I made the meal that were high in carbohydrates.
And
So
it's because, would you say that that has a lot to do with the routine that you set in place for yourself? Like, so for me, what I'm trying to say is when I'm feeling down or if I'm feeling upset, I will throw in a movie. At least back in college, I used to do it all the time. I don't anymore, but I would throw on a movie and I'd pop a bag of popcorn, right? And I would eat that bag of popcorn. But I got so used to that routine of, okay, if I'm feeling down, if I'm feeling sad, if I'm feeling depressed, that's what I'm going to do. And so would you say it was the same thing that you came home and you had the mentality about, I'm going to have 2 beers for dinner and I'm going to have some chips? Was that like the routine?
exactly. So, and we're dancing around an issue right now. Um, and so this is what I want to say. A lot of times, and I've experienced this as a health coach too, when I'm trying to understand how to help the people that I work with, right? There's a certain cadre of experts out there that want to say emotional eating is okay, I'm upset and I get this signaling that says, okay, I need to go eat, a quart of ice cream, right? And I want to be really careful here because I think that is not correct. I think that when we're younger and you being, half my age or whatever, you have this advantage over me right now in that when we're younger, we develop habits. And it may well be that when you're young, there were things that happened in the family or whatever, but but maybe in response to that, you were encouraged, let's say, to eat a certain way, or maybe as a child, because of the standard American diet and the fact that everybody reacts differently to this massive amount of carbs that's in that diet. Maybe this individual was overweight. I don't know, and the way that the family responded to that was put them under pressure to eat a certain way that over time develops into a habit. So I think that as humans we fall into this habit of eating a certain way, and eating carbs activates the same location in the brain as these other things. I already said that, but what does that mean exactly? What that means is that when we eat carbohydrates to a certain level, we're releasing endorphins, and they make you feel good. And if you do this enough over and over and over again, like in my case, I'm 62 years old, right? And I ate when I was pre-diabetic, diagnosed as pre-diabetic, and gout before that. I had decades of these habits, right? That led to the moment of those numbers, flipping medically to the point where all of a sudden I had this condition, the pre-diabetes or whatever, along with the gout. And so what I'm saying is that uh, I don't like the idea that society is pointing fingers at the person and saying, well, you don't feel good. You have some sort of like emotional problem and you're eating to fix it. I think that is the same type of logic that is not healthy, that people hear from doctors when we go into the office, like in my case, oh, you're pre-diabetic. And then you get this slick little email from the doctor that says exercise more and eat the Mediterranean diet. And I sat back and said, exercise more? I'm a CrossFit athlete. What do you want me to do? I'm already CrossFitting 5 or 6 days a week to the point where my joints hurt, right? How much more do you want me to do? And then Mediterranean diet, I didn't understand at that point enough about like the stuff that we're talking about this morning to know that there were certain habits, right? The the big ass chocolate bar that I was having every single night, the 3 beers before I even had dinner, and then a plate of food that was, you know, it had a massive amount of carbohydrates on it. I didn't get any of that. I couldn't understand why, after making a Thai dinner for both you and Linda, that an hour after that meal, I was hungry again. How could you? I mean, think about how many not just the calories that were in that, but because the calories is another thing, but the amount of carbs in there. I'm certain by the end of one of my Thai meals that I had probably had over 200 grams of carbs. And we're just talking about the 3 beers, the chips, and then the meal, not counting, the amount of carbs I'd had previously. You know what I mean? Breakfast and lunch.
And I think you make a good point, though, like in the sense of, and I guess I'm trying to just incorporate it back, because for me, like, I think you think very scientifically, and I think it's funny that I have a chemistry minor and still some of the words you say I don't understand. Thanks, college.
Well, clarify them in human speak for the rest of the audience then.
Well, so I think the one thing you said that really resonates with me is the fact that I think a lot, and this has to do with society. Like I'm not sorry, because we've been taught multiple times that if we're feeling down, like it just like have some ice cream. You go through a bad breakup, here's some ice cream. You're sad, here's some ice cream. You're upset, here's some popcorn. Like, it's just to be complete. If you want to have a night out with the family, have some popcorn. Like, it to be honest, like, it's been ingrained, I think, and I think our family on one side, with you and I've always said, for everyone on here, I have 2 moms and 2 dads, right? So I grew up with Dad and Linda on one side, and I grew up with my mom and my stepdad on another side. And I think that we have completely different, how you guys did things with you and Lindy was very different from how Dad and Mom did things, right? And so in the sense of what was considered like a family night out, we would watch, you would cook dinner, we'd go to the movies, but we rarely got popcorn. We ate beforehand, right? Like, we have very different routines. Whereas with Dad, Daddy Bob and Mom, it was very like, okay, we go to the movies, everyone gets their own large popcorn, and then you'd have Daddy Bob go and fill up again on another piece of popcorn, or he was like that person that would steal like the large popcorn bags out of the trash can that were like clean used, like go fill it up because he didn't want to have to pay for another large popcorn. But it's 2 completely different, like, in a way, 2 different ways of growing up. So for me, a common thing was I felt very comfortable eating popcorn at a movie night out. But what you're saying is, and I think to this day, I'm like, oh, that's going to make me feel better. It's an emotional, and I'm saying for me, I am emotional, right? So for me, I'm like, I think, wow, it's going to make me feel really good. I might do that. But what you're saying is when I do that, it's actually, there's a signaling going on, right? So it's like if I have popcorn, all of a sudden, I'm getting signaled that I need to have more popcorn and I need to have ice cream. I don't know if anyone else on this call feels this way, but if I give into that feeling, like Dad was just saying, if I have popcorn, if I all of a sudden I'm like, it's gonna make me feel good afterwards, and then like me being thrown out of ketosis, I feel like shit. I'm gonna be completely honest. Like, because I don't eat like high carbohydrates anymore, I feel like absolute crap if I eat that. But it's like the initial, like, it's gonna make me feel really good for a second, right? And then what you're saying though is once you eat those, like, you get excited at the fact that carbohydrates, you have that mentality, it's going to make me feel good. Well, those are your endorphins signaling, right, that, okay, if you eat this for a little bit, you're going to feel better, right?
Yeah. So, but I think you're raising a really good issue here, because I think that we also, I don't think you and I should simplify this to the point where, okay, you eat some carbs, it makes you feel good, and that's why you keep eating them over and over again. When we think about our life, perhaps the night you were eating popcorn, and I should shift back to myself here quickly because I don't want to say how you felt, but perhaps on those nights when you were having popcorn, it wasn't just the popcorn. It was a setting that uniformly with the family felt good. It was a place
Yeah.
of peace, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, those moments that when I'm making dinner, and nowadays you're out of the nest, right? So you're not here, but I'm still making dinner for Linda and I, right? And oftentimes she'll bring up to me, you know, well, you like to cook. It's true, I like to cook. All right, let's get that on the table. But that hour or maybe a little bit more that I'm actually making dinner, it's a time of peace. It's a time of quietness that I then supplemented with the 2 to 3 beers every night and the chips. Or sometimes I would have some of Linda's salted almonds, right?
Mm-hmm.
That a single almond doesn't have that many carbs in it. But I didn't stop at one almond, right? It was like, you know, third, fourth, fifth handful, same thing as the chips, right? So then you have that component that is now added to this environment that you seek to go to because it's peaceful. I mean, and I use the word peaceful, and people can take that however they want.
I think what you
You
mean by
make,
peaceful is it's comfortable. It was
yeah,
an experience that you were in, and I'm sure everyone can agree here on the call that you have. For me, I resonate, movie nights with my two brothers, my stepdad, and my mom as a sense of that was comfortable because
yeah.
we all loved movies. Like if you know that side of my family, we are movie fanatics. Like we grew up my stepdad, I mean, we were watching like The Godfather when I was like 7 years old, and I think which I don't know, I wouldn't recommend that, but I wouldn't recommend that. But we were watching, I used to all of these movies all the time. We were just constantly. So it's a place of comfort for me to think about that. Mom always made homemade popcorn in a little container, and she'd douse it in butter and salt. Or if we went to the movies, like that's how it was. That was movie night, right? And that was a comfort. And so I think what you're saying is when we think back to those experiences, like when I think about my emotional aspect with food, emotional aspect, so I'm going to say the signaling for carbohydrates, right? When I think of that, I think back to a moment and a type of food that made me feel very comfortable. And I am emotional. Let's be honest, Dad. I am 10 times more emotional. Like you're very, you're very, I mean, you know me. I'm an emotional. I love emotion, but I hate it at the same time. I'm very emotional. So I really love experiences. I love the way I feel with, eating new foods and trying new things. Like I'm very emotional in that aspect. And I have a connection with it that's just a lot more than like I can think back to a time and a place that I ate something new, and I will go back and I'll feel every single emotion that I felt that after like that evening, right? And how good everything was and how I felt in that exact moment. And so for me, that's been a hard aspect of, going, like staying strict keto. And I think it's something, and I wanted to bring it up today because I think it's important that we talk about that difference. Like I'm a very emotional person. I do all those things, but what I need to work on and what I guess how do we, if you're having a moment like that, how do we change that habit? Like what did you do to change a habit? You know what I mean?
So
Like how did you, because I still struggle with that. If I have a movie night, what can I possibly like like substitute popcorn for? And I've tried chicharrones. Trust me. like
it's not the
like
same thing.
it's not the same thing. Like it's not the same thing. So like how do you break that habit, and how do you get rid of that for someone who's so emotional and expresses and loves every single moment, time, and place? How do you disconnect that and change that mentality and that habit so that you're no longer, I'm no longer going, I'm just going to have, a piece of like a thing of popcorn, and then all of a sudden I feel okay for 2 seconds, right? And then I eat the piece of popcorn and I feel like crap for like
So
3 days.
so I think it's really important. I don't know about you, but in some ways, I think that in the discussion that we're having, that I'm clarifying some of my own ideas about this. So we want to be careful, because I think that we touched on a really important thing, and that's the idea that the combination of eating a certain way in an environment, I want to say social environment, but in a family environment, let's say, or even to extend it a little bit further, in a social environment that was extremely comfortable and peaceful, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in my own, and now when you apply that idea to decades, right? Living your life over decades, then every single time that you have a certain type of food, it can take you back to that place, even subconsciously, or maybe more so subconsciously than any other factor. And I think when we talk about emotional eating, that we need to think about it in the context of what I just said, instead of the idea of pointing the finger at the individual and saying there's something wrong with you. When you get angry, you have to eat. I think that is going back to the idea of the doctor, right? Pointing fingers at me when I was pre-diabetic and saying, you're not exercising enough, and oh my God, eat the Mediterranean diet, you idiot. And it's like, you walk away from that experience going, I'm just like everyone else. I am not an idiot. And what do I do about this, right? I think on some deep level, you understand that if you're going to reverse the situation, yeah, there's something I need to do, but it's not about you being a bad person, right? It's not about that. Do you understand what I mean? So then,
Yeah, and
getting to your question, how have I reversed some of these things? Well, I thought a lot about that because I knew you were going to ask. I didn't know because I knew. I just had a sense that you were going to ask. How do you do this?
father-daughter telepathy.
Yeah. So, I think part of it, which makes me unique probably to the rest of the group that's here right now, is that I've gotten back into climbing, so I don't have to say anymore that I've only was climbing for 40 years. Now it's well over 50.
Only 40 years.
So the issue is that I had a really strong association with, risky situations. And I developed over years and years and years of that, going into the mountains and things like that. And I've told you thousands of stories, where me and my partners narrowly escaped, being killed. And so when I was diagnosed as pre-diabetic, I went into the bathroom, I looked in the mirror and said, no, this is not acceptable. I'm not going down this road. It's just a matter of figuring out what needs to be done. And on that day when I was standing in front of the mirror, I didn't know even one iota what I know now. I didn't know a thing about the ketogenic diet. I didn't know anything about the things that we've discussed this morning. And honestly, there are things like, I'm really thankful I didn't have to cut the coffee out.
Yeah, same.
Right? As I learned about the ketogenic diet, I was like, I'm going to have to give up all these things. I'm giving up my chocolate, right? And I'm going to give up the potatoes and the white rice and all those kinds of things. I'm not going to sit here and say that stuff was easy. It wasn't. And I'm very thankful I didn't have to give up the coffee. Honestly, the alcohol is still a struggle in my life. I think it's like the popcorn for you, right? And I'm not drinking every day anymore. And when I do drink, I'm not drinking 3 beers. And some people might say, well, alcohol is that's completely different than carbs. But be careful, because the alcohol and the carbs and heroin and all the rest of addictive drugs, methamphetamines, they're lighting up the same part of the brain. Absolutely. There's strong biochemical evidence. This is not like woo-woo, some guy sitting under a rock somewhere who's come up with this idea. We know that that's true. But the thing that makes it different is that the carbohydrate effect on that area is more subtle. And I already said this. So like it takes a lot more time to develop, a stronger addiction to that and I'm still trying to figure out where the alcohol is in my life, and that's a daily thing where it comes up.
Hold on, I want to just say something for everyone who's on. So when I just moved home from college in 2018, and I was actually renting Dad and Linda's like little studio apartment behind their house. So I was over, hanging out with them all the time. When Dad first got diagnosed with pre-diabetics, or pre-diabetes, I will say I've never seen my dad actually scared at something. And what I mean by that is I've never seen him just look like absolutely terrified about how this even happened. And so, I went in one day because I would just walk over and like pound on the door. I'm sure that was nice all the time, and I looked at him and he was just like, well, I got diagnosed with pre-diabetes, and you could tell he was really distraught. So for 2 weeks, I didn't really talk to Dad because he was kind of in a bad mood and he was trying to figure out all this stuff. Right. And so one day I come home and I go over and knock on the door, and Linda answers it, and she kind of looks at me, and I was like, where's Dad? And she's like, he's running sprints down the street. And I'm like, it's 8:00 at night. Like, what do you mean he's running sprints down the street? So Dad comes in with his weighted vest, and he looks at me and he's like, I think I'm going to figure it out. I'm going keto. He's like, with this weighted vest on after he'd been like doing sprints down the street. And I was like, okay, Dad, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, I'm going to be fine. So that's how Dad figured out the keto lifestyle. And it wasn't easy for him because I've seen my dad in the face of all types of fear, right? I've seen him, I don't want to say literally look down the mouth of a bear, but he has pretty damn near come close to that, right? And so seeing this fear of, his health taking control of his life, that was an absolute not going to happen. So I don't think that going keto and changing all those things that we're talking about today, I don't think it's been easy. You had to change your whole entire routine that you've been doing your whole entire life, it's the same thing with Mom. She still drinks, she doesn't anymore, but she drank 2 beers a night. I think it was just a routine that you had gotten so comfortable with that it was like all of a sudden you're faced with, shit, I thought I was doing everything right my whole entire life, and now I'm looking down the mouth of a bear. Your head's kind of in there and you're like, how am I going to get out? And what am I going to do? So I don't think, I really want to reiterate that the challenge is, Dad, I admire you so much because I envy you sometimes because you're so scientifical about things. And for you, it was an easy, convert over. And it wasn't easy. I realized that it wasn't easy, but damn,
yeah, it was an easy decision, but then making it work, it's been hard work. It's, and I want to say to you, this is one thing I want to emphasize, because we have all kinds of different people here, is that this business of going low carb, it really depends where you are in your life, and if I knew, when I was 20, what I know now, a lot of the hard work could have been avoided by just going low carb way back then, right? You have a lot more flexibility in what you can eat than I do, because once you see your numbers turn, once your numbers are to the point where a doctor is saying, okay, you're diabetic or you're pre-diabetic, or, you have, you're on they're putting stents in your arteries. Once you're at that level, what you need to do to reverse that is completely, or I don't want to say it's different, but it is completely a different level of extremeness than it is when you're your age. Because your metabolics are still more flexible, right? Mm-hmm. So, like with Linda, she's probably, my wife, she's probably doing around 100 to 150 grams of carbs a day, but with me, it's like I've really locked down this lifestyle. I avoid getting much above 50 grams of carbs on any given day. There's sometimes when I know I might go over a little bit, like when we go to our favorite restaurant, they snuck some croutons into the
They always freaking do that. They always, I'm like, no bread.
Yeah, cauliflower. And I crunch down and I'm like, okay, well, I'm pretty resilient these days, so I'm going to go for this. But I did test my blood later, you know, and I was in the okay range. But, you know, it's like, but I have to be careful now because of my age and the fact that it's 2 years now for me, literally on in the lifestyle and staying at 50 grams. I've never been out of ketosis. I can say that in total honesty, and looking into the camera. I've come close a few times, like when we were traveling in Africa a couple of years ago and eating restaurants full time. That was a challenge. Scraping the glaze, you know, like when we were served food on because, you know, an international flight, 15 hours on an American airlines, right? And they serve you all. We got the breakfast tray, and out of 10 items, there was only one that didn't have carbs in it. And Linda was like, "What are you going to do?" And I'm like, "I'm going to eat the eggs, and that's it."
Well, that's like when I took a flight when I went to Brazil, and Brazil's a very like carb heavy country, right? I mean, bread everywhere. And I was on the plane there, and they gave me, I think it was like, I had the option of like croissant and fruit for breakfast or something like that. And I was like, okay, like I can't eat anything here. But I did see Austin did comment in the chat, and he said that one of the fun things that we've done in finding low carb recipes for some of our favorite foods so we can still eat yummy, wholesome foods during social family times. I agree with that. And the first part I want to state is Babs is on the phone, Austin's mom, and she actually introduced us to chicken. It's actually like a shredded chicken crust with you put in it. This is how you make pizza crust, right? It's shredded chicken from a can with mozzarella mixed in there with 2 eggs. You can use rotisserie chicken, whatever you want to use. But one challenge I have here, and Austin can attest to this, is finding any freaking food that my brothers like to eat. I mean, we're in the middle of South Dakota. My brothers are meat and potatoes, high carb, love, you know, bread, muffins, everything like that. So every single time that I have to make dinner, it's always like, oh, what is T gonna make? It's gonna be some keto stuff. And it's really annoying hearing that all the time. So there's 2 foods that I have made so far. They don't like cauliflower mash at all. But their favorite is the keto lasagna that I make with zucchini. And then their other favorite is I made that pizza for them the other night. And they loved it. And so I do have, for those of you who want it, I do have a Pinterest board that I just created with, it's actually from my own personal account, but I created it and brought it over to the Ketonic Revolution account. I've created a whole Pinterest board of foods that you can make that are keto and that are definitely, family certified, family approved on this side. If your family's from, you know, we're from the Midwest, love, you know, the meat, potatoes, everything like that. And so I mean, my brother even said, I think Eli's words verbatim to my mom was, that was like some phenomenal pizza. And to get a compliment from him is hard. So that was, yeah, I wanted to put that out there because I think it's a really good.
That's good, T, because I think new recipes are definitely something we need a few more of, Pete, because we do tend to eat a lot of the same meals over, you know, like I love them, but I want some variety more. I think it would be good.
I'll share it with you too. I shared it with Dad. You can pick some on there.
Oh, good.
It's really,
yeah, I need more
really
recipes too, so we can keep rolling on our delivery of recipes on the YouTube channel too. But T, we're running out of time now. I mean, we've already gone over actually.
Do you guys have any questions or comments?
Well, it's definitely, I just wanted to say, since I'm Pete's wife and T's stepmom, that it's been really good for me because I've lost weight that I didn't necessarily know or need to lose, but it's made me feel lighter eating this way. And I've definitely had some benefits from my sinus issues have definitely changed for the better.
Mine have too.
That's been really, really good for me. And there's some other things, but that can be another time. It's definitely been a good
I'll add one
change
thing.
in my life.
Can I add one thing? This is Pete's sister-in-law. Can you hear
Yes.
me?
Go for
Yes.
it.
Okay, so I think while I haven't really lost weight, I mean, I just still kind of fluctuate in the same place. And I try to keep my carbs at under 100. I'm usually right at that. But other than that, my lifestyle hasn't changed. I still do the same kind of exercising for the most part that I did, maybe a little more Tabata workout. But anyway, the improvement I've noticed is that I don't have the same gut issues that I had before, like gas and bloating. So that was always an issue for me, and that's like gotten way better. I mean, I just rarely have that, once in a while, but very little.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
that is good. It is that's something that means you're doing it right. I experienced a lot less bloating as well.
Yeah, I think it's the cutting out a lot of the sugars. And, you know, your comment about the alcohol, Pete, I think for me, you know, I live alone. I used to have kids here. They've grown up. I mean, I just spent a lot of time alone. And I think that glass of wine at night for me, just the one glass of light red wine, Pinot Noir, it's like a friend thing for me. And so that would be the issue I would need to look at, that when I sit down at the end of a long work day and just taking in so much information and processing so much, it's just like I have this friend sitting next to me. And, you know, I could try to make a friend out of a cup of tea, but I haven't worked hard on that yet. At least a few nights a week.
I hear you on that because, and I'm not, you know, we're all adults here. It's like, you know, having one drink or whatever, I don't know. I'm struggling with this idea of it. Is it a problem or is it not a problem? One thing that I've noticed, that in fact, the only thing that I've noticed about it, because I'm tracking sleep now, and most of, maybe, I don't know, there's people here that I haven't met, but I think that of the people that know me, you know that I have beat to death the biometrics on this stuff. And these days I'm monitoring sleep. I've got the Aura Ring. And one thing that I've noticed is that even one serving of alcohol disrupts my sleep patterns. And in any case, I don't want to go on about this because we've already gone long enough, but I'm just saying that I'm still trying to figure out, like at the beginning of this, we talked about, there are two things about the emotional eating. There's the aspect of your own personal relationship with food, and then there's the social aspect where there are pressures there. And I'm trying to understand my personal relationship with alcohol. What I can do or what I can't do with it. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and sleep is impacted for sure. That's why I keep it to one glass, because I know I don't sleep well when I have more than one, and even that probably is making my sleep less good.
Anyone else want to chime in? Well, T, I think we're at the conclusion of another. If anyone out there can think of something that you would like to hash out, leave a comment, and you know, we'll see.
And if you want the Pinterest as well, I added a ton of recipes, and this has been over 2 years of recipes. And I'm a very I like I said, I love food. I love it so much. So I try and make things that like I would miss on the keto. Being on keto, I've basically found a way for it to make everything that I miss and everything that I love to make it keto. So if you want that, just comment your email and I can send that over.
I want it.
Okay, I'll send that. I have your email. I'll send that over, Lindy.
Okay.
So if you like what you heard today, you enjoyed the conversation, please in the comments below leave ideas. If you would like to hear us hash something out, you want to be part of the conversation, then leave your topics in the comment section below. We would really, really love that. Thank you for all that joined us this morning, and we're looking forward to seeing you again next Friday. Again, if you've got something that's burning in your mind about the low carb lifestyle, anything at all, let's take it on. Leave the comments below. Thank you very much.